I'm Chloe. Growing up in suburban Indiana, I learned pretty early that being the oldest and being a girl meant one thing. I was expected to be fine on my own. No applause, no praise. Just manage. My little brother Caleb, though, he was the miracle child. I still remember the way Mom lit up when he walked into a room. Her tone changed. Her eyes softened. You'd think he cured cancer just by existing. I was 8 when he was born. By then, I was already folding laundry, helping with dinner, and getting myself to school on time while Mom tended to her little man. She said it often, boys need more attention, Chloe. Girls are naturally independent. At 10, I was changing his diapers. At 12, I was packing his lunch and walking him to the bus stop. I remember once, I asked Mom why Caleb never had chores. She gave me that look, the one that said, I was being difficult, and said, he's a boy, Chloe. He'll catch up later. You just help him, like a good big sister. So I did. I helped. I helped when he made a mess. I helped when he threw tantrums. I helped when he didn't want to do homework, so I'd do part of it for him just to keep the peace. And when I got straight A's, I'd get a nod. When Caleb scored 1 goal in a soccer game, Mom threw him a pizza party. I used to wonder what it would take for her to look at me like she looked at him, to speak to me in that soft, proud tone, but it never came. I was dependable, responsible, low maintenance, as she called it. Not special, not worth extra effort. Dad wasn't much better. He was around but distant, more of a fix the car and pay the bills kind of dad. Mom ran the emotional show, and she made it clear, Caleb mattered more. It sounds bitter, I know. Maybe it is. But when you're constantly reminded, subtly or not, that your needs are less urgent, your feelings less important, it wears on you. It carves something in you. Something small and quiet that whispers, you're not enough. That whisper followed me for years. And yet, I kept trying. I kept showing up, hoping someday she'd see me. Not as her helper, not as the one who's fine, but as her daughter. High school was when the divide between Caleb and me got even clearer. By junior year, I had a near-perfect GPA, volunteered at the local library, and worked part-time at a diner to save for college. I stayed up late writing essays, filling out scholarship applications, while Caleb played video games in the living room and complained about having to study for algebra. When senior year rolled around, I was accepted into 3 universities, with partial scholarships to 2 of them. I was thrilled. But when I showed Mom the letters, she barely looked up from folding laundry. That's great, honey, she said. But have you heard anything about Caleb yet? I blinked. Mom, he hasn't even applied anywhere. Well, he's just taking his time. You know boys, they need a little more guidance. It was like nothing I did could ever be enough. Even when I got a full ride to a state university, tuition, housing, everything covered, she barely reacted. But the moment Caleb expressed interest in attending an expensive private college for music production, she sprang into action. She pulled money from her savings, took out a small loan, asked Dad to pitch in. Just like that, they made it work. I asked her once, what about me? Why didn't we talk about using that money for my education? Her answer cut deep. Because I knew you'd find a way. You always do. It wasn't a compliment, it was a dismissal. Caleb went to that private college, barely lasted a semester. He said it wasn't the right vibe and moved back home. No one blamed him. No one called him irresponsible. Mom even threw him a little welcome back dinner. Meanwhile, I ended up going to a local community college. I worked 30 hours a week and took night classes. I lived with 2 roommates in a basement apartment with mold on the walls and paper-thin windows. But I made it work. I had no choice. Sometimes, I'd call home and tell Mom about my classes or how proud I was after passing a tough exam. She'd listen for a few seconds, then ask, have you checked on your brother? He seems a little down lately. It was like she couldn't see me at all, like I was just a stand-in, someone to check on the real star of the show. But here's the thing. The more they overlooked me, the harder I worked. Not to prove them wrong, just to build something that couldn't be taken away from me. Even if they never noticed, I did. I knew what I was capable of. I just needed time and a little space. to show it. After community college, I packed my life into a beat-up Honda Civic and drove to Nashville. No one threw me a going-away party, no tears, no advice. Mom just said, "You sure you want to be that far from home?" Like I was moving out of spite instead of survival. But I needed out. I needed space, physically, emotionally. I needed to breathe in a place where no one saw me as the backup plan. I found a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. The paint peeled, and the heater rattled like it had asthma, but it was mine. Rent was cheap. Because it had to be, and I took a receptionist job at a small tech company. The pay was terrible, but I was grateful. I worked 9 to 5, then picked up shifts at a bakery 2 nights a week. On weekends, I learned coding online. Free YouTube tutorials, borrowed books from the library. I'd never felt more exhausted, or more alive. Back home, Caleb was still finding himself. He dabbled in music, Ubered a bit, then quit because the vibes were off. He lived rent-free in my parents' house, occasionally doing odd jobs Dad lined up for him. Mom would call and update me like it was good news. "He's trying, Chloe. That's what matters." I didn't say much, I just kept working. Eventually, someone at the tech company noticed my self-taught skills and let me shadow a junior developer. I kept learning. I kept showing up early, staying late. Within 2 years, I was promoted. When I called home to tell Mom, she said, "Oh, that's nice. Caleb's thinking of starting his own record label." I laughed, not to mock him, but because the contrast was absurd. I was living off cheap noodles and caffeine while trying to earn everything from the ground up, and Caleb was still brainstorming dreams from his childhood bedroom. But I'd stopped waiting for recognition. What I hadn't expected was how lonely success would feel without a family to share it with. I wanted to tell someone how proud I was, how hard it was, how I cried in the parking lot the day I signed my first lease on a real apartment with a working dishwasher. Instead, I kept it all in, because girls like me, we don't ask for help. We don't expect applause. We just keep climbing. It was a Tuesday when Mom called me, voice tight and emotional. "Chloe," she said, "Caleb's going through a rough patch. He made some investments that didn't pan out." I waited for the ask. It always came. "We might lose the house if we don't cover his loan," she finally said. "We need help." Not he needs help, we. I was quiet for a second. Then I asked, "How much did he borrow?" She hesitated. "Almost 30,000. My stomach turned. "You co-signed." There was a pause. "You said it was for music gear," she whispered. "But I think he used most of it to buy crypto and, I don't know, he meant well." I should have been shocked, but I wasn't. I knew Caleb. He always chased the next big thing without finishing the last. And Mom always covered for him, financially, emotionally, spiritually. "Chloe," she said, her voice cracking. "I know it's not your problem, but you're doing so well. You have a good job now. Can you help us?" There it was. Not long ago, she told me boys needed more support because they faced bigger pressures. But now that support came from me, the daughter she barely acknowledged through most of my life. I told her I'd think about it. Then I hung up and cried. Not because of the money, but because she never called when I was eating ramen 5 nights a week. She never checked in when I couldn't afford heating during winter. But now that Caleb had failed again, spectacularly, I was the backup plan. The next day, she sent me a long text about how families should stick together. She attached photos of us as kids, me holding Caleb when he was a baby. I didn't respond. A week later, Dad called. He almost never called. "Chloe," he said, "your mother's been crying every night. Maybe you could just help this once." "This once?" I asked. "How many just once have there been?" He sighed. "He's your brother." And I, calmly, for the first time, said, "And I'm your daughter." That used to mean something. Then I hung up. I didn't send the money. I didn't follow up. I was done playing the safety net. If failure has no consequences, it becomes a habit, and in my family, it had turned into a tradition. At least for Caleb. I wouldn't fund it anymore. A year passed after that phone call. I didn't hear from Mom much. When I did, it was short and cold. No questions about my life, my work, or how I was doing. Just distant updates about Caleb, usually framed with a tinge of guilt. "He's trying, Chloe. It's hard for him." I stopped replying. By then I had moved into a better apartment, still modest, but with a real kitchen and walls that didn't echo every neighbor's sneeze. I had started leading small projects at work and even got invited to speak at a Women in Tech panel. It felt surreal. Then, one Monday morning, I got an email from Mom. No subject line, no greeting. Chloe, I'm sorry to reach out like this. We're losing the house. Caleb moved in with his girlfriend. I have nowhere to go. I read it 3 times. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't say she missed me, just, I have nowhere to go. For a moment, I almost deleted it. But then I remembered how it felt, years ago, living in that freezing basement apartment with mold on the ceiling and no one checking in. I remembered her silence when I succeeded, her quick concern only when Caleb failed. And yet, I also remembered being 8 years old, carrying Caleb around while Mom made dinner. I remembered wanting her love so badly, I convinced myself that helping her would earn it someday. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was power, but I emailed her back. I'll help, but on my terms. I had just purchased a small 1-bedroom condo as an investment property. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, safe, and close to a bus line. I offered to let her rent it at a discounted rate, as long as she signed a lease like any other tenant. She agreed. When she arrived in Nashville with 2 duffel bags and tired eyes, we barely spoke. I handed her the lease, the keys, and a printed list of bus routes. She didn't cry. She didn't thank me. But she signed. I wasn't doing it for her, I was doing it for me. To prove that I could be kind without being used. That I could offer help without losing myself in the process. For the first time, she wasn't in control, I was. And maybe that was the only apology I'd ever get. Mom lived quietly in the condo. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for favors. For the first few months, we barely spoke outside of rent reminders or occasional texts about the leaky faucet, but she paid on time, every month, like any other tenant. For the first time in my life, our relationship had boundaries. Clear ones. I'd stop by occasionally to check on the place. She'd make tea. We'd sit in silence at first. Then gradually, we began to talk. Not about Caleb. About weather. The grocery store nearby. Her new part-time job at the bakery down the street. She hadn't worked in almost 2 decades. I was surprised she'd taken the initiative, but I didn't say anything. I just listened. Then one day she asked, softly, "Do you hate me, Chloe?" I froze. It was the first time she'd ever asked me a question that wasn't about someone else. I looked at her, at the woman who once told me without blinking that Caleb deserved more because life was harder for boys. The woman who turned me into her emotional crutch, and then forgot I existed the moment my brother stumbled. And yet, there she was. Sitting on the couch I bought, in the condo I owned, drinking the tea I paid for. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but I stopped trying to make you proud a long time ago." She looked down, her hands trembled slightly as she held the cup. "I didn't know how to raise a daughter," she whispered. "My mother never let me speak. I just kept repeating what I was taught." It wasn't an excuse, but it was the first honest thing she'd ever told me. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to protect that cold wall I'd built over the years, but another part, some buried, worn-out part, wanted to believe maybe she finally saw me. "You don't have to fix it," I said. "Just don't pretend it didn't happen." She nodded. And for the first time, I saw her not as the woman who failed me, but as a woman who was failed too. That didn't erase the past. It didn't suddenly make us close, but it gave me something I'd never had before: peace. She still calls me "your place's landlord" in her phone. It's a joke now. A quiet kind of acknowledgement. She pays rent, I check the plumbing. We're not mother and daughter in the traditional sense. But for the first time, it's on my terms. 6 months after Mom moved into the condo, I hosted a small dinner at my place. It wasn't anything fancy, just a few coworkers, some friends from the tech panel, and a homemade lasagna I nearly burned. It was my way of celebrating my team getting acquired by a bigger firm. It wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but to me it meant everything. I didn't invite Mom at first. Part of me still wasn't ready to mix the past with the present. But then, the night before, I sent her a text. "I'm having people over tomorrow. You're welcome to stop by if you want." She showed up 15 minutes early, holding a tray of lemon bars she'd baked herself. She looked different. Not just older. Softer, somehow. Quieter. She said hi to everyone, then helped me arrange the food without being asked. Throughout the night, I caught her glancing at me. Not watching, not judging, just observing. Like she was seeing me for the first time. After dessert, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. Everyone else was laughing in the living room. "You've built something real, Chloe," she said, "and you did it without anyone's help." I didn't know what to say. Compliments from her still felt foreign, like wearing someone else's coat. "I used to think boys needed more," she continued. "But maybe I just didn't believe girls were allowed to take up space." She paused. Then looked me straight in the eyes. "You proved me wrong. Then I'm glad you did." I swallowed hard, because as simple as that moment was, it hit me in a place I didn't know still needed healing. I nodded. "Thanks, Mom." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. Later, as she left, she squeezed my hand and said, "You're not the same girl who left home in that old Honda." She was right, I wasn't. That girl had been desperate for love, for recognition, for someone to say, "I see you." This woman? She'd built her own home, set her own terms, chosen her own peace. And now, she was being seen. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven my mom. I never know how to answer that. Forgiveness is tricky. It's not a clean slate or a hug in the kitchen while dramatic music plays. It's not saying it's okay when it really wasn't. It's quieter than that. Slower. Less cinematic. I don't forget what happened. I don't forget the years I spent invisible. The nights I cried over ramen in a freezing apartment. The way she praised my brother for showing up, while I was out here building a life from scratch. But I also don't carry the weight of it anymore. I set it down. Not for her, for me. Because I've realized something. I don't need her to see every detail of the woman I've become. I just need to keep becoming her. For me. Mom still lives in the condo. She's found a rhythm now. She takes the bus to work, pays rent on time, and even bakes for the neighbors. She still calls me when the toilet makes a weird noise or when she burns banana bread. I answer, calmly, clearly. Boundaries are a beautiful thing. As for Caleb, we haven't talked in almost 2 years. He moved out of state with someone new. I hear things here and there, mostly from my dad. He's still chasing something. Maybe he always will be. But that's not my story anymore. My story is this. I was born into a home where I was told boys deserved more, that my job was to make sure they got it, even if it meant giving up pieces of myself. But I learned, slowly and painfully, that I deserved more too, that being capable doesn't mean being disposable, that being strong doesn't mean staying silent. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I just needed to prove to myself that I could live without begging to be seen. And now, I do live. Fully. Freely. With a sense of self I built from scratch, in the quiet hours no one noticed. I pay my mother's rent not because I owe her, but because I can. And that power, that choice, it's mine.